There's a story that, as you mentioned Garvey, that there was a school, the Marcus Garvey School, that according to what has been said, and even by some who appeared before this commission, that you organized a school called the Marcus Garvey School and was there propagating a socialist ideology to your students, one of whom was the late President Samuel Doe.
When I was leaving my studies in Chicago, as I told you, a friend had taken me to the Marcus Garvey to one of their meetings. At that meeting, or at one of those meetings, when I was introduced as a Liberian, in fact, after the meeting, one of the members called me aside and asked me if I knew what was happening about the Marcus Garvey branch here in Liberia. I had never heard of a Marcus Garvey organization here. That person gave me the name of the Reverend Clarence Harding, who was, they have a title for, but the person on the ground who was in charge of the Marcus Garvey organization. I came home and put that piece of paper aside and didn't really get to it until one day while I was clearing out some things. I found that piece of paper with the name Clarence Harding, and that they had a school on Clay Street, opposite Demonstration School. So one evening I went to look for Reverend Harding, and I was fascinated by what he was doing there. That little building was jam-packed with people who were going to school, sitting almost like sardines in a tin, one close to another, hot. But this man had a program of education for people who worked in the day, including soldiers who left BTC in the evening and went there to school. It's not far from BTC, as you know. I was so impressed by what he was trying to do, I volunteered to help. Not only to help myself, but to recruit some of my socially conscious students who would spare the time to go there and teach free of charge. There are many, some of whom you know, who spend their evenings at Marcus Garvey free of charge. There was a time when the Ministry of Education was trying to close down this school, as they were trying to close down many schools, and many of us decided to put much more time free of charge there as if we were members of the regular staff. I taught social studies there, and so did many of my students. Some taught mathematics. And of course, when they saw the roster, the Ministry of Education saw the roster of this school, they got interested in going there to see if these people were really there, and they were there. So this was a regular high school, not organized by me, but organized by someone who had an interest in the education of Liberian youth, and was indeed supported by people like myself. About Samuel Doe, I must tell you this much. In the 10th grade class, I remember going in one evening, and there was the 10th grade social studies teacher was absent. And so I went in to take the class for the evening. I put up a map, just to talk about map of Africa, countries, capitals, major cities, the kinds of things, a bit of African history, independence struggles and all that. And we had a very engaging discussion. Not a single word about Liberia. And I recall vividly during the meeting, during that class session, there was a student who asked me, said, why when you people learn your book, you don't like to join the army? My response to that student was, well, some people like military, others don't like military. And so I never thought about being a military person, and so I'm not one, and so that's it. The student didn't respond again. This was about 1976, about that period, I'm not quite sure. Years later, in fact in 1980, after the coup, in one of my meetings with head of state Doe, he said to me, do you remember in Marcus Garvey School, somebody asked you why you don't like to join the army? And of course I remember that question. I said, yes, I remember that question. He said, I was the one who asked you that question. That was indeed the extent of my relationship prior to the coup with Master Sergeant Doe. He also told me, and so did many members of the PRC at the time, because remember the coup took place within months after, or I should say a little bit over a year after the postponement of the mayoral elections. He and many others had from time to time said, but Prof. Doc, y'all can take chances, or y'all people, y'all don't like security business. So when you were at the university that day speaking about the mayor campaign, when you and Chuchu Houghton were running for that job, I was in the crowd outside, and from where I was standing, I had a clear view of your head. Why you don't like to take security precautions? The political activities of the day were followed very closely by a lot of people, including the junior men in uniform. So this thing about people having to spoon feed these fellas is really wrong. The level of discourse in the society was being followed very closely by some people we didn't even know. Mass rallies involve a whole lot of people, not just students, market women. That mayor campaign was supported by a range of people, including government people who used to come in the night and bring money to support it. This was a period where the signals for change was all over the place. There was an epoch that was about to birth, and we didn't know it.